Hi, it's Cam here. I wanted to unpack an idea, a notion I've been thinking about for some time now. And I was kind of thinking about the last 2 years. How do we define it? And for me, I look at it as that we're living through the age of fear and loathing. Yeah, fear and loathing. A couple of years ago, we started first hearing about this coronavirus, and we were already starting to be fed fear. We were given a diet of fear right from the start because we should be terrified of it. And as time has morphed on over the last 2 years, more and more of that's been fed to everyone. I mean, the media has done 24/7 of feeding the fear porn. The politicians worldwide have fed the fear porn. There was a constant obsession with the fear porn. It was just nonstop. Now, for those folks who are familiar with the mass formation psychosis term, that third of a group who really fell for this or kind of went all in on this were people who already had some kind of a fear before. It wasn't anything new. They were fearing that the world was going to be overpopulated. They feared that the climate was just going to end. There was something they had to hold on to because there was nothing else they were moored in. They had to have a cause, something to be fighting for, something to be identify who and what they were. So this pandemic, this coronavirus fed very well to it. And for the first time, everybody was singing the same tune. Everybody was feeding this fear obsession of theirs. The media was doing it. The politicians were doing it. Everywhere they went, they were validated in what they believed. And what was one of the greatest validations of this? Wearing masks. Perpetually wearing masks, even though the science didn't support it, even though the agencies that condoned it were contrary and differed on it so much. The psychological benefit to the people wanting to basically control others or feed this fear porn, for whatever reason, could be profit, could be power, could be whatever. The mask was the greatest identifier because what the mask did is that it constantly told us and is telling us today, whenever you go somewhere where there's a mask, there's an emergency. You go to a hospital, when people are wearing masks, it's serious business. Somebody's being operated on. It could be life or death. So out there, the mask was that great symbol for this. And for me, I kind of looked at that these people were like Covidians. It was like became a cult. And the way to identify those that were deep in the cult is the masking. And even when I understand it, okay, so there was mandates, people wore it in stores and different places. But when you see someone wearing a mask outside in the middle of a rainstorm with nobody around, they're full in Covidian. I mean, it's all the way there. And they believe this on some level. However, the other thing that this slowly started morphing into was loathing. The people who had bought all into this narrative also began to loathe others because they were like, how could you be so cavalier? Don't you care about others? You're insensitive. You're a flat earther. You're a science denier. Because it allowed them to elevate themselves to a higher level, a moral superiority. Their religion, COVID, became their dogma. And anybody who did not toe the line, didn't get on board, well, they were obviously a heathen and they didn't get it and they just didn't care and they didn't have that moral superiority that these folks felt they had. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse because as time went on, as the fear porn kept getting fed and these people's fear just heightened and heightened and heightened, they started loathing more and more and more to the point where you saw the outbreaks, you saw the Karens of the world who were lashing out at others for not doing it. And the only way you really knew if somebody was part of your cult, the mask, that's it. So anybody who wasn't wearing one, it was an us against them. And this is what it's turned into, which of course political leaders use as the great divide. So these people, as I call them for lack of a better term, became useful idiots. They became useful in the political pawns of the people who wanted to keep pushing this thing along. Now, I'm not saying they're idiots. What I'm saying is they became useful to someone in this cause. Someone fed their fear, which turned into loathing. And instead of taking that out on that person who was feeding it, they took it out on everybody else they see that didn't come or conform and go along. So why am I saying all this? Well, as restrictions change, as vax passes end in certain places, as mass mandates are ending, what I'm beginning to see is, for example, in the University of Arizona recently, students went on a protest to have mask mandates reinstated. They felt that ending mask mandates was not reasonable and they should be reinstated. Washington, D.C. recently ended all vax passes, and there is a city council person who went on a tirade, and many actually, citizens as well, who wants it reinstated. Her argument was that now businesses will be crushed because those that were fearing COVID, those who wanted the vaccine passports, aren't going to go to restaurants. The reason she's doing that is because I bet you deep down her biggest fear is that restaurants will be booming, business will be busy, like it is in Florida. People, when given choice, will make adult decisions. However, that won't comport to her worldview. So that's the problem. When you're so deep in the fear, so deep in the paranoia, and you loathe other people so much, anything that comes against that crushes who and what you are, because you've put all your worth, all your identity in this. So that's our challenge, people. That third of that group, that was the mass formation psychosis group, they're going to be slow coming out of the ether. And unless the politicians see the political winds changing, which they have now, ergo all of the relaxations, all of the disabling of mandates, and we can thank our Canadian truckers for that, because they were the spear, the tip of the spear that started this thing. Because I said all along through this whole thing, this ends when we say it ends, when we say no. And Canadians finally started saying no, and the world caught the disease and is starting to say no, and it's spreading everywhere. And we're realizing that that's happening. But the folks that were part of the fear and loathing, the Covidians, they are going to not give up without a fight. For them, this is their identity. They're all vested, all tied in. So you have to be mindful of that as we see this, there's going to be skirmishes still. There's people who are going to be holding on. That's why you're hearing the term one-way masking. I don't know if you've heard this term before, but it's being dropped in the media, different articles. One-way masking is basically you wear a mask if you're concerned. Sounds a lot to me like choice. Now, media can't say that, because if it was bodily autonomy, freedom of choice, it would be counter to everything they've sold us so far. So that is part of what's happening. I just wanted to kind of talk to you about this and help you kind of unpack what I've been thinking, and just, I would love your thoughts on it. But that to me is it. We have lived through that age of fear and loathing, and the challenge is going to be, how do those people that loathe others so much turn? How do they give this away? And as more and more evidence drops, as more and more facts drop, that perhaps the folks like us who said, hey, this is insanity, prove to be correct, as history will judge. And if we are on that side, the folks that were all bought in are going to have a very hard time, because like I said, the Covidians, it's a cult, and it's hard to deprogram somebody from that, because once they're in, they're in. My hope, though, is that we will be able to bridge that gap, because some of these people are members of people's families, their friends, their former friends, and it's a shame and a tragedy that all this destruction, all this chaos has been rained upon by people who've used these folks as pawns essentially in their game. While we have reason to always have valid concerns and fears, there's always going to be a segment of our society that the more we feed this, the more paranoia creeps in and things get out of control. So we have to just, I would say, be kind, give some grace and latitude towards these people, because it will not be an easy decompression for them. For some of them, it might take months. For some of them, it might take years. And for some of them, it may never happen. Anyway, just thought I'd share that with you. Happy to do so, and we'll see you next time.